I'm really thrilled to introduce Valerie Guild. She's the founder and president of AMED Melanoma Foundation, which many of you probably already know here or at home. They've made an tremendous impact for all those living with melanoma and really moved the field forward in a patient-guided direction to focus on the priorities that really meaningful to those living with melanoma. Thank you so much for being here, Val.
Not necessary. So I want to thank the Kaiser physicians. Ooh, it's a preview. The Kaiser physicians and the staff for inviting us to partner with them. I'm actually amazed myself every time I get up and speak to think that I founded AIM so many years ago. This is not what I expected to be doing with my life. This is for sure. You met my daughter, Sam, in pink. When she was 10 years old, she cut herself on a screen door, went to the emergency room. She was wearing flip-flops, and the emergency room doctor looked down at this birthmark on her foot and said, "Boy, if I were you, I would have that checked out." I said, "Okay," and he said, "I know this really great dermatologist in the city," at that time for me, it was New York City, "you go and take her." So the dermatologist examined her and said, "Oh, it's a very bad birthmark. There's about a 5% chance that this could turn into melanoma. It's not an easy operation, requires a skin graft. It was a pretty big birthmark. She'll be off her feet for 2 weeks. But you don't really ever want to deal with melanoma." I didn't know a lot about the disease. He certainly filled me in. I understood, and this goes back 35 years ago, how deadly melanoma was. She got a skin graft. We moved forward. As far as I was concerned, I was finished with melanoma. I wasn't getting up on any dioceses. I wasn't giving any speeches. I was glad to be done with it. 15 years later, Sam found something ugly on her arm, didn't like the way it looked, unattractive. She was 26, went to the dermatologist who said, "Well, I don't think I like the looks of that. Let me send it out." Came back as a melanoma. They did sentinel lymph node biopsy, which you just heard about. Came back clean. She was 1B pretty early. I was the official nagger. And I can tell you that was a very long week for me. I wasn't going to scare her, but I had learned my lesson about how deadly melanoma could be. I knew what kind of, diagnosis we were waiting for and what it would mean. So I did play the part of nagging mother, made sure she saw the surgeon every 3 months, saw the internist every 6 months, took her for a second opinion to a melanoma expert just to make sure. But besides being the official nagger, I have to tell you that I walked away from melanoma. I figured we had dodged a bullet. I was glad. As I said, I nagged, but I was done with this disease. 3 years later, that's my middle daughter, Charlie. She was 25, graduated from college with a double major in neurobiology and Russian literature, took her med boards, got an offer from Wall Street, decided she wanted to go to Wall Street because she knew nothing about stocks and bonds, and if she didn't know anything about something, she wanted to learn about it. Had a chest pain, went to the doctor, had a chest x-ray, it was fine, pain went away, everything is good. 6 months later, pain comes back with a vengeance. My internist calls in some specialists. They spend 2 weeks doing testing, and they come back and they tell us that it's an itis. Lots of young women in their 20s have itises, and cortisone, and it's all going to be good. So he says, "You know what? Let me just check off one more box and run an MRI." I said, "Okay, we'll check. It's going to be nothing." Made an appointment for Monday morning because she was going on a business trip. I'll give her cortisone shots. And I said, "You know what? it's a nuisance for her to get from her house to your office, so I'll come with her. I'll drop her off at the office, then I'll go to my office. That was 16 years ago this last Monday. And to this day, I don't have to close my eyes. I can picture exactly what his face looked like. He didn't even have to say anything. So Charlie was diagnosed with stage 4 melanoma. And as many of you know, there were no treatments back then. There was nothing. She decided she was going to beat this disease. She had always been a very philanthropic kid. We moved here, she was 13. First thing she did was volunteer at Alcatraz. I thought for sure she was going to bring home, a lifetime murderer. She volunteered at the old age home. She won the International B'nai B'rith Award at 16 for helping bring the issue of Bosnian refugees to the UN's attention. She did all these kinds of things. And so she said that when I beat this disease, I'm going to help people who have it, and I'm going to find a way to eradicate it. Charlie died 9.5 months later. And it became a mission. Everybody faces this disease differently. I have to be honest and say that I was probably a crazed woman. But what I did know was that I was going to go out there and make a difference. And I wasn't exactly sure what the difference was, but I was going to do that. And I didn't start a foundation. I spent 6 months traveling around the country. I spoke to melanoma researchers, I spoke to patients and their families, I went to every melanoma meeting. So my family likes to call this Charlie's ultimate revenge, because as much as she loved science, that's how much I hated science. And I had spent my high school and college years trying to avoid every science course that I could take. And this is how I wound up. So I decided that my goal was going to be to fill the gaps. I didn't want to reinvent the wheel, but I wanted to figure out what we needed to do to prevent the disease, to have early detection, to help people at every stage of the disease, and to also do something about finding a cure. So I founded AIM at Melanoma, and back then, 15 years ago, I had a business card from Staples and a cell telephone. That was it. So I had a plan, and I'll tell you about that in a few minutes, a big picture plan. But I said, you know what? While I'm waiting for that big picture to happen with this foundation of just me and a business card and a cell phone, I'm going to take on the indoor tanning industry. And my goal was to ban indoor tanning under 18. My daughter was not an indoor tanner, but once you get involved in this, I heard from a lot of people how many lives we could save. And of course, I also heard that this was going to be impossible because we were going to go up against the indoor tanning industry. So what we've learned is you should never tell me, at least when it comes to melanoma, that something is impossible. So we led the charge on melanoma, indoor tanning. We passed the first bill banning indoor tanning under 18 in California in 2011. We've had legislation in more than 30 states, and we will not stop until we have banned indoor tanning in all 50 states. And I will tell you that the Indoor Tanning Lobby Association literally went bankrupt fighting me. I just had me and lots of volunteers. They actually had to pay for lobbyists in every state. So while I was doing this, about 2 or 3 years into it, I realized that there was no comprehensive melanoma site on the web. And so we set out to create that, and we now have the most comprehensive melanoma website internationally, has been translated into many, many languages, and offers literally hundreds of pages of information. We have something called the Melanoma Learning Center, so when we were talking about side effects, we have a $2 million project that we created to train nurses and doctors on how to deal with side effects, but we have a huge section for patients that you can find there. We do 10 patient symposiums around the country. We have a wonderful melanoma physician's assistant, Melissa, who is happy to answer your questions, email, telephone. We've just started Peer Connect because it is hard to find support groups solely for melanoma patients and caregivers. You can join no matter what your stage, and we pair you up by age, sex, stage, children, you name it. And we run some really game-changing initiatives that fill the gap part. So we have an international think tank that we run twice a year with the top melanoma researchers from around the world. But finally, I want to spend a couple of minutes and tell you about the project that actually got me started 15 years ago. So when I went around the United States and then literally around the world, so I just got my United monthly whatever, statement. So I have now hit over 1 million miles since I started this foundation. I kept saying to researchers, so what can I do that other people can't do? Tell me what it is. And they all said to me, we need a fresh frozen melanoma tissue bank. So that sounds very complicated, but what it means is that for all cancers, the genetic code, kind of the secret for the disease, so remember, this is coming from a woman who hates science, that genetic code is in your primary. So we know that melanoma is different from every other cancer in so many respects. Well, the one thing it's different in as well is that our primary doesn't get taken off in a hospital. And so in order to have a tissue bank, and they have tissue banks in breast cancer and lung cancer, and they've made enormous progress in terms of research because of these tissue banks. But our primary gets taken off in a dermatologist's office. Typically, you're in a hospital, and they get to take the blood and the urine and your medical history, because we want all of it, and they take that primary, and they take a part of it, and they freeze it in special freezers. So I know we all watch CSI, but the truth is that DNA disintegrates over a period of time. It's not really that good for research when it's old. And RNA, which is what the researchers really need, that dies in less than an hour, unless it's fresh frozen. So everybody said to me, it's never going to happen. I mean, we're never going to get a melanoma tissue bank because, our patients are all in dermatologist's office. It's not going to happen. So it's hard saying no to me, and I never say no. And I also say that the worst thing that anybody could hear, I've already heard. So if you say no to me, doesn't stop me. Now, does it take time? 15 years I've been working on this project. And in order to get it done, I had to find 5 major academic institutions around the world, and I had to get them to agree to work together, not so easy, and collect the tissue and the blood and the urine and freeze it. And here's the really tough part. After they do all that work, they have to agree to give it away. Because the idea is not to just supply these researchers. It's so that researchers from around the world, when they need the tissue, which still doesn't exist, can write up a proposal, send it to the tissue bank and say, I've got this incredible project, but I need the tissue. So after 15 years, the first center will open next month, and 5 other centers will follow. So I would be the first one to tell you that not everybody is as crazed as I am. And I have to say that after all these years, I love this foundation, and I did it for my daughter, Charlie. And not everybody wants to do this, but we are looking for volunteers. We would love for you to help us, and whether that's helping to run a walk for us, or joining peer support and being a mentor, helping us with legislation, writing a check for research, we would very much like you to join us in this fight. So I would like to introduce Alicia Rowell, who is our vice president, who could give you a little more information about how you can join us. But I have to tell you, if you go to our website, my name is there, my telephone number is there, my email is there. We are always ready to help if you have any questions or anything that you would like information about. Thank you.
Hi, and thank you, Val. Val noted that there were some days that it was hard to get out of bed, and not everyone's as crazy as she is when it comes to devoting herself as she's done to melanoma. I will tell you that I know how she feels, at least in a very small way. My husband's a melanoma survivor, and I was his caregiver during, one of you mentioned it, interferon, the dead year of our lives. And I know after Charlie died, she decided to do this, and I'm fortunate enough to have joined her and the foundation and Sam in fighting melanoma as well. We get asked all the time by many people who are getting to that point where they would like to help. And believe me, during the bad year, the dead year, I wasn't ready to help anybody do anything. I just needed to take care of my husband and my 3 children and my job at that time. But if you're at the point where you want to help join this army of people who are changing this disease, we have a lot of ways you can help. And I just want to elaborate a little bit more on what Val's talked about. Number one, if you are interested in being a mentor or a mentoree, we have a director of community engagement named Brenda Busby. You'll find her name and contact info on our website, and you'll also find a little document in your folders about that. You'd be surprised how nice it is to talk to somebody who's going through what you're going through. If you feel like you've been in it for a while and you want to mentor, we have room for you. And if you have a feeling that you'd like just someone who knows the game a little bit more to mentor you, we have room for you. We'd love to have you. Please look for that on our website. You'll notice on our website a vast array of walks nationally across the country. And I will say that we had one for years in Alameda. And this was actually run by a teenager in high school. Her uncle had melanoma, and in his honor and then in his memory, she ran this walk until she went to college. And we haven't found a new Alameda Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area person to run this walk, or people. We need certainly a coordinator, and then a group, a committee, and then a larger group of volunteers. Sometimes it feels good to just physically get out there and just put on a t-shirt that says I'm walking for my life and for yours, and we'd love to have you if you have that interest, particularly those of you right here in the Bay Area, any city in the Bay Area. We need help. Sam runs our legislation side of things, and although we've taken care of California, there's more that can be done on a multi-state level. And if you I think if you saw that number of the deaths moving down to the 7,200 range from the 9,000 range, the reduction in mortality in the last 8 years has been due to this great advance in research. And I won't lie to you, it takes funds. So if there's any interest on your part in supporting our tissue bank and any of the work we do, we will very happily work with you on your donation. Our site has a very easy click on for that. We also want to make sure you hear about Melissa Wilson, our physician's assistant, because sometimes in between appointments, you might have a question. You know, what about my skin this? What about my fever this? You can't see your doctor? Melissa will call back within 48 hours. Email or call, your choice, how you like it. And if you have any suggestions for the types of things that we could put on our website, I think one of the physicians already spoke on that Kaiser creates their program based on what you need. We're the same way. We're the most comprehensive website out there on melanoma. If there's something you think is lacking, please contact us. We're here for you. We've been through it. We're here for you. Thanks very much.